Daniel Harris was at Old Trafford last night for the capitulation and the humiliation of Manchester United against Manchester City. Do you share the views of Roy Keane that this is terminal?
No, I mean, it's never terminal, because it was terminal in the years before Roy Keane got it. It was much worse in some of the years before Roy Keane got there. In the early Alex Ferguson years, it was poor. I think at least now there is slightly more hope than there has been, because I think there's a manager who may or may not be good enough, but he seems to have a good idea on which players are definitely not good enough, which we saw from his selection last night. I don't think he thinks Matic is good enough. I don't think he thinks Herrera is good enough. I don't think he thinks Mata is good enough. I don't think he thinks Lukaku is good enough. And he seems to have had enough of what Anthony Martial considers a hard night's work. And he may not be given the money to replace those players. He may not invest the money properly. He may choose badly. But I think that gives him one up on the three predecessors that he's had. Is he knows who isn't good enough.
It's hard. Okay, so definitely those players feel like they're not the right players. And yet, looking at the team selection last night, he did pick Shaw and Fred and Pereira and Darmian and Young and Lindelof and Smalling and Pogba. And you wonder if he thinks any of those players are good enough either.
I would say it's hard to say. Luke Shaw has improved since he came in. He might not be good enough either, and he doesn't appear to have the physique of an elite level athlete, I would say.
That's polite.
Yes, well, Lindelof is also improving and is someone who deserves more time. Smalling, we know, isn't good enough, except he would be a decent number 3, say. And I also think that if you put Smalling into City's team and gave him the work City's defenders have to do, and gave City's centre-backs the work that United's centre-backs have to do, you would probably be slightly surprised by what you saw. I mean, in the first half, for example, Vincent Kompany clearly didn't want the ball. United were pressing him on the ball, and he gave it away repeatedly, but didn't quite give it away to someone who was able to exploit it. I think that what United centre-backs are asked to do a lot of work, and why I've said repeatedly through the season that if United had got themselves a midfield, you would find the defence suddenly look better, because United would be able to dominate possession. And you've seen in recent games, United couldn't dominate midfield, couldn't dominate the game against Watford, against West Ham, against Leicester. But never mind against teams like City, who are the best team in the country, who look like they're going to win the league. And when that happens, it means you're not going to make enough chances, and your forwards are going to be feeding off scraps. And it means that your defenders are going to have a lot of work to do. And often the weight of pressure is going to tell, because the more defending you have to do, the more the opposition is likely to exploit you. And defenders get, as well as getting physically tired, they get mentally tired. And you find that as the game gets into the second half, mistakes come in.
Yeah, look, that definitely makes sense. And you can see how a team is a team for a reason, and they all are interlocking parts. If Solskjaer is to be given an opportunity to shape this, and we've seen that there has been some, at least semblance of tactical nous within games and from game to game when things were going well. The run that they're on at the minute, though, is the type of challenge that you need a lot of experience to be able to deal with, unless you have a proper clear out. Are we at the stage where there will be a proper clear out, where 8 players will go this summer, and where maybe he sacrifices somebody like David De Gea to raise money? I don't mean sacrifice, but like he accepts that De Gea moves on, and they just completely gut that changing room, so that it is only going to Solskjaer's changing room from next season.
It very rarely happens that you see that many ins and outs. It's possible, but because if you think about the money that ought to be available, and of course, bearing in mind how the Glazers operate, none of this is set in stone or even likely. There's the money that they would ordinarily have in the summer, however much that is. Let's say it's 100 million, 150 million. Sounds absolutely ludicrous, but that's probably what there could be. Then there's the money that they withheld from Mourinho last summer because they didn't trust him. Then there's the money that they saved that they might have intended to spend getting Maurizio Pochettino, probably another 50 million. Then there's the money that they're going to generate with transfers. Perhaps they'll have to pay some players to go away, but you would expect that Ander Herrera's going to leave, that's his wages. Juan Mata's going to leave, that's his wages. And there is a big question to be answered about Paul Pogba. who is someone who there probably is money for. You get the impression that he does want to leave. And it's a difficult situation because on the one hand, he's clearly the most talented player in the United squad. He's clearly the best player in the United squad. And yet, he's not putting in the kind of effort that enables him to make the most out of his ability. He cruises through games waiting for something to happen. And if all he did was run around like a midfield player should, make some blocks, make some challenges, he would be a brilliant player and he would be elevating the level of this team. But he's 26 now, I think. That's not going to happen. The player that you see now is the player that he is. And so it's not necessarily the case that he is the best player to take United forward because it doesn't really look like the intention is there. So if you were to then sell Pogba as well, you in theory would have a load of money to spend and then also the margin for error not to have to nail absolutely every single signing. If you're only signing 3 players into that squad, you have to absolutely take them off the set. They have to be perfect and they have to be mentally the right kind of players that you want and they have to really affect change very quickly.
Is there the brain power within Manchester United to do that at the minute? Because we had a list of roughly £801 million that they had spent on players, and it's very hard to point to anybody who was an unqualified success from that. I think obviously De Gea would have been separate from that list, but there's roughly 800 million in transfer fees and wages that have gone out if you include somebody like Alexis Sanchez, and you're like, none of these are really players that you're going to build a championship winning team around. So who is the overarching Krang here to make this thing work?
So, yeah, I mean, every signing since Van Persie basically has been, at best, a qualified semi-success. I think that Solskjaer is someone who probably has a good idea about what makes a good player because he was one and he played with lots. And I think you could say the same about Michael Carrick. But I do also agree that there is a lack of expertise in the current management team in that there's no one who has a track record of success, really, in the particular job that they're doing. There's Mickey Phelan, who is someone who, it seems, is more someone it's good to have around who makes people feel good, and that's important, but it's not going to help you pick the right players and do the right deals. So, yeah, there's no expertise and no track record of success in doing deals, and there's also no track record of success in blending a team together, selecting the right players. But I would say that Michael Carrick and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer played with such high-level players that it feels like it's impossible for them to at least watch the players that they're managing at the moment and think that they're good enough. Whether that extends to judging the players that they should sign remains to be seen. So it's unknown, but what you've also got is previously you had David Moyes, who thought a high-level player was Phil Jagielka, was clearly completely unsuited for that role. Then you had Louis van Gaal and Jose Mourinho, whose ideas were very different from David Moyes, whose ideas were very different from one another's about what constituted a good player. And also, they're not managers who are going to go somewhere and stay there for a long time. Van Gaal was basically doing his last job before retirement, and Mourinho never stays anywhere a long time. So they weren't people who were going to stay there and build something, who were looking for players who would be coming into their bests. They were looking for players who were going to immediately come in and do all the things that they wanted to do, and signing rafts of those players. Solskjaer wants to stay and build something which gives him an advantage over those guys, and also he has some good young players coming through, and it's advantageous for him to bring those players through because he's not planning to be gone in 3 years. He's planning to stay for as long as he possibly can. So the circumstances are better than they have been previously, and there are reasons to believe that Solskjaer and Carrick will be able to pick good players, but no evidence that they'll be able to do it whatsoever, so it's a punt. But then, if you look at someone they might have brought in, like Mauricio Pochettino, let's say, he's clearly an outstanding coach, but there are also questions about his signings in the transfer market, admittedly with far less money than he's going to have Solskjaer is going to have, but there are still questions about whether he has the expertise to come in and do that, given that he bought Clinton and G, given that he bought Vincent Janssen, given that he bought George's Kevin and Kudu. So there are questions about whoever might have come in. And there are questions about Solskjaer too, and questions in all the areas, but some reasons for you to think that he might have what it takes to pull it off, except things that are too good to be true usually are too good to be true, and most people in the world would take this job and fail at it, so you've got to assume it's not going to work, I guess.
Daniel, last point, we were talking about this a little bit earlier on. I think the Man United fans are missing the point when they were happier that it's going to be City than Liverpool who win the league. While the Liverpool rivalry is the old stereotypical traditional one, that was the ones that you had to knock off their effing perch, Manchester City have so much money and so much momentum that this might be the new normal, where they score 100 points in the league title every year, and you've got to get more than that to try and stop them. So derailing them in any way possible now, this was your shot.
It is, I guess, amusing in its way that Liverpool could get 97 points, lose one game, and still not win the league. But I think that if you're looking at it as a United supporter, you could, you try and look on the bright side, try and see it as win-win. Perform well last night and stop Liverpool. Don't put up and stop City. Get beat last night and stop Liverpool. So it's either win-win or lose-lose. But I think, yeah, City now are settling into a pattern. I think you could see the way that they were attacking last night. If you look at when United attacked, and they did have some good situations, the balls were sort of arriving at Rashford and Lingard at shin height, at knee height, at hip height. So then what you require is a perfect touch from Rashford, a perfect touch from Lingard, who's read it, and then a perfect return and that kind of thing. And what you're seeing from City is simple passes in straight lines because the movement is good. I guess what might happen is that Aguero doesn't have that much longer left. David Silva is close to done affecting the highest level games. At least with Silva, they've more or less replaced him already with the nearest possible thing, to the extent that he even shares the same name. Aguero will be harder for them to replace, and if other teams start to get better at attacking and better in midfield, that defence is still nowhere near where a high-level defence needs to be. It's just that the midfield protects it pretty well by dominating the ball. As a United supporter, looking at in a biased way, I guess, or a partial way, you kind of tell yourself that Liverpool haven't won the league for 29 years, and it's pleasant to keep adding years on, and perhaps they won't be able to reproduce that season. And it's also nice to look at it and you think, well, City's success is, I guess you might suggest that it's artificial, because it just exists by the single biggest factor behind City's success is money of ill provenance. And so, I mean, you're consoling yourself with that kind of thing, really. In a footballing way, obviously, there's no real consolation. But not quite a week ago, the treble was on the table, the quadruple was on the table, and anything that isn't those things feels like a birthday present. So it doesn't almost matter who wins the league out of City and Liverpool, because they're both bad, but neither of them are. I'm reevaluating everything I thought about not only football but my life, which looked like it might have to be done previously. So I don't. Liverpool winning the league, City winning the league, neither of them are excellent, but really you want your own team to take care of their own business. And on the one hand, United are quite some way off that, but on the other hand, there's probably more hope that they might be able to achieve that than there has been in a little while.
Daniel, great stuff. Thanks for joining us this morning, and happy birthday.